if somebody has a lesion in their dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or if you transiently inactivate it with a technology, a non-invasive technology like transcranial magnetic stimulation, they can now just put a magnet on outside the skull and quiet that area of the brain transiently. In animals or humans, what you find is that person or human becomes incredibly accurate at any motor task. So for instance, if I were to give you a shooter game where you're supposed to shoot targets and you're shooting targets, you'll have some hits and some misses, like anybody. If I inactivate your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, your accuracy goes through the roof. It's near 100%. But the one thing you can't do is decide whether or not you're shooting an enemy or a friend. So you can no longer establish rules. You just become very good at execution of the motor behavior. Similarly, in an animal or person without a dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
You see a trade-off there, right, between specificity and flexibility.
That's right. And so we see this theme over and over again, where as a purely, sensory motor response machine, the prefrontal cortex isn't even necessary. In fact, if you get rid of it entirely, people become like machines. If I click over here, somebody has no prefrontal cortex, basically everything becomes a stimulus. A puppy, everything's a stimulus. I used to have a bulldog. When he was a puppy, you had to worry about leaving cords out and everything went into his mouth. By the time he was, a year old, in part because he was a bulldog, he just kind of lay there. Like you could put a toy in front of him and he wasn't into playing and just leave it alone. A baby, everything's a stimulus. Many adults become infant-like in their responses, right? When anxiety is high. In fact, I have a friend who's a psychologist. Tell me if you agree with this statement or not, that anxiety makes children of us all. I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly has been my experience that when feeling anxious, I don't struggle with chronic anxiety, but I certainly have felt anxiety.
Well, it simplifies us. I mean, all these underlying emotions and motivational states, these primordial instincts, are simplification mechanisms. And so if we're unable to compute a complex and sophisticated pathway forward that takes multiple variables into account simultaneously, we can't just do nothing. We're going to default to a more primordial and direct state. And then you might say the whole panoply of emotions and motivations lies there at the weight for us to grip our behavior if we're paralyzed by inability to choose between multiple options. And so we do, to the degree that we're simplified by an emotion, then we're reduced to something more approximating an infantile state.